Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. I have a really cool project for this week. We're gonna skip the making of because this project actually is a very easy project and it's gonna give us a super elegant dress in the end. So I wanna tap into the old money style that I've been getting flooded on my Instagram for some reason, probably because I'm interested in it and I really like the style. So the algorithm just knows. But anyways, I wanted to do my own version of a old money dress. So old money basically means super elegant, super sophisticated. In my opinion, very classic. And I want to do a puffy sleeve, slim waist, and then a teeny tiny bit of A-line with some slits over the knee length in a linen fabric. So I'm gonna do this very gorgeous brick colored linen right here, which I think is gonna make a super classy summer dress. And if I have enough time, I'm gonna do a separate belt in the same fabric as well, so that you can cinch it in at the waist. If not, you're just gonna wear another belt. Anyways, I think that's gonna be super fun. And because it is such an easy project, I did not film a making of because I literally just had a few hours of the tryout and then it was done. I just changed the sleeves a tiny bit, made them a tiny bit smaller, and that was it. So no making of for this project, and we're gonna jump right into the tutorial. So just one thing that I wanted to mention, the skirt portion of the dress is cut on the bias, as you can see here. So very stretchy along the hip and waistline, and that's just gonna make the dress fall better, sit better, be better in general. It calls for more fabric. That's why it is, you know, not used as much as, in my opinion, it should be. But it also has different properties. The skirt just falls differently. So there are a bunch of other reasons as to why you choose to cut on the bias or you choose to cut on the straight grain. I chose to cut on the bias for this dress just to give it this extra elegancy that I think the dress deserves. So my tip for you guys, if you do anything on the bias, I would suggest to use an interfacing tape with a stay stitch so that the bias is not getting longer and longer, so that you have the same lengths on every single seam along the skirt and also right here at the waistline, so that it fits together with the bodice that is cut on the straight grain. That's just a small thing that I wanted to share with you guys. It's just so much easier, especially also in the zipper in the back. Do put the interfacing tape with a stay stitch on there, otherwise your zipper is just not gonna look good. Alternatively, if you don't like to have the white strip right here, you can just sew along your seam allowance and have then the seam be fixed in place. Essentially, it's doing the same thing as this tape. You just stitch along it and also like have this stay stitch right there. So these are the two options. I would highly suggest to choose either one of those to sew this dress. Otherwise, I think it's gonna be rather hard actually to work, especially with linen, because linen is like very flimsy on the bias. So that's just a small thing that I wanted to share. I also put the interfacing tape onto the back shoulder and also all the neckline front and back and the center back seam. So we're gonna start off with the darts in the front and the back pieces. I just put them onto the wrong side of my fabric so I can, you know, sew along. Same thing to the back, they're just a teeny tiny bit bigger. So let's go ahead and do that. So now that the darts are in, we're gonna iron them flat, and I wanna iron them towards the side seam, also in the back piece. So I'm using my round tailor's ham because the dart here in the front is round. So I get this a really nice transition from dart to no dart, as you can see here. Super smooth, really like that. So let's do the other side and then the back pieces. So now that that's done, let's go ahead and close the shoulder seams. So I'm going to put right sides of back and front shoulders together and then just sew the two shoulder seams. And for any shoulder seam actually, or most probably, at least that's how I know it, the back piece is a tiny bit bigger than the front piece. So you want to ease both pieces together. That's why there is no interfacing tape with a stay stitch on the front piece, because you need to kind of stretch it to fit the back piece. You can see the difference here. That's supposed to be like that, so you ease them together. It's just gonna make the shoulders sit better. So let's go ahead and close these. Okay, With that done, I also overlocked my seam. I'm gonna iron the shoulder seam towards the back. Like that, and then we can already continue with the sleeves. So for the sleeve hem, we have different folds, and I went ahead and just put the 10 centimeter lines onto the wrong side of my fabric. And what I'm gonna do now, so you can see there is a bigger distance, a smaller, bigger, smaller, and so on. The bigger one is the fold that you want to put in. So essentially you're just gonna put right sides together, check that the line matches up. You wanna maybe put a needle into the tip so that these two spots match up. And then you just want to go ahead and sew from here towards the end of that line and fix the fold in place. And what I like to do, and I also showed you that in a reel already on my Instagram, if you reach this point, just do a curve towards the inside, like so. So I'm just going to draw it on here for you to see. Just go further and do this kind of curve and then stop, back tack, and you're done. This way, there's not going to be this weird kind of knotted look at the end of a fold if there is tension on it. So you're going to distribute the tension onto stitches rather than one ending of a seam. It just looks better. So if you ever have any problems anywhere in a garment, just do this trick and it won't occur. So I'm going to go ahead and continue doing that, then put the next fold, the next fold, and the next fold in, and then we have the final length of our sleeve hem. I'm going to repeat the same on the other side. So that is what that looks like. I think it looks really, really cute. And you can also see when I pull on this, the tension is distributed along the stitches and you're not having this one stitch that creates a hole in the weave. So that's just a small tip. I want to go ahead now and iron the folds flat on top here, like this. I'm just gonna go up until that 10 centimeter mark. There is no need to iron anymore. And that's what it looks like from the front. So these are all still intact, not flattened, and they're gonna create some volume in the sleeve. So what I personally want to do now, you know, once you wash it or whatever, linen is not gonna stay the way you iron it. It's just gonna do its own thing. It creases very easily. So if I do this, the fold is in there, you see that. So I don't wanna go ahead and have to iron this flat every time that I washed it. So I'm just gonna go ahead and tape it down. You can totally stitch it down as well. That might be actually an option to do a little bar tack. Maybe I'm gonna do that. Just a tiny little bar tack up here at 90 degrees. Here. You decide however you want to fix this in place. You can do a decorative top stitch all along the folds. You can do a bar tag at the top of each fold, or what I'm gonna do, or you can also hand sew it in place. Very elegant, probably the best solution here. I am not going to do any of the above. I am going to just stick it in place with some hem tape. The classic cheap method of fixing fabric in place. So I have a teeny tiny bit of hem tape. I'm just going to put it on the inside of the fold and iron it down so that it sticks. In my experience, this does not get loose after washing. It might not hold up forever, but then you can just put it in place again. I have not noticed any displacement, and then that's a helicopter. I have not noticed any displacement and then gunking up any other spots. Okay, that's that. That's the sleeve hem done. For now at least. I'm gonna quickly repeat that for the other sleeve. Okay, both of these are done. So the next step is to add the gathering stitch into the sleeve cap. You have 2 notches and the shoulder notch, so you have 3 notches. But the 2 side ones, so the front and the back sleeve notch, those are also the gathering notches. So you want to add 2 rows of gathering stitches into the seam allowance. I like to start, pivot, go back, so that you only have to knot one end. It's just a thing that I like to do. And then we're going to gather the sleeve to fit the arm's eye and the bodice and put everything together. So let's go ahead and do that. So with my gathering stitches now in, I also knotted both the upper thread together and the bobbin thread together, I am going to take my arm's eye right here. I'm going to determine which one goes where. So this is my back piece. You can always see the back piece is usually the less sloped one, the one with a bigger distance from notch to side seam. And usually right here is my shoulder seam where there is more space generally. So this is the correct sleeve for this side. So I'm going to put right sides together, and I like to start with just putting the notch at the shoulder together with my shoulder seam. And as you see, I have not gathered yet. I'm going to do that once the sleeve is pinned in place. That's just how I like to do it. You can obviously do however you like it best. I'm going to put the front sleeve notch together, the side seam, and the back sleeve notch, and the side seam. And now I'm taking the bobbin threads and I'm just gonna gather the sleeve to size. And it doesn't take that much because these are not like overly puffy sleeves. So that's already enough, as you can see here. And now I'm gonna distribute my gathers so that most of the gathers should be centered here around the shoulder notch. So I'm just gonna manually do that. And then they should decrease in frequency while, reaching the front sleeve notch, and then same on the back. And I'm ready to sew the sleeve in. Okay, that's what the sleeves look like, and I want to go ahead and steam the shoulder portion. The rest I can iron, but right here where there are all of the folds, I just want to carefully steam, so I'm not pressing down on the folds. I'm having my iron lifted up because I just want the seam allowance to face into the sleeves without pressing down all of the folds, essentially. So now, where the folds are not anymore in the way, you can go ahead and also iron the seam allowance into the sleeve. Like that. Everything now faces into the sleeve, and I'm going to repeat the same on the other side, and then we can continue putting right sides of our side seams together. So all the way from waistline into the sleeve, and we can close the side seam. Just make sure that first of all your seam matches up here on the underarm, and then also both seam allowances face into the sleeves right here. So I like to just fix that in place with a pin so that I'm super sure that I'm getting that right. And then I just need to match up waistline and hemline of the sleeve, and I can sew and overlock as well. Okay, let's go ahead and iron the seam allowance of the side seam into the back. So I'm using my sleeve board so I can easily put everything towards the back. And while we're at it, we can also overlock around here and then fold the hem of the sleeve up 2 centimeters. What you can also do is fold 1 centimeter double so that you don't have a overlock seam visible. So I might want to do that. So like that, and now I'm gonna go ahead and sew at, what is that, 1.5 centimeters maybe, or 1 centimeter like that. Okay, for now, the bodice is done, so we can continue with the skirt. And what I'm gonna do right before I put the skirt together is actually overlock the front dividing seam allowance on both the front and the side front pieces, because we're gonna have a slit in that front dividing seam at the hem, and to finish the edges on the inside, it's just better to have those pieces separately overlocked. So I'm just gonna overlock all front dividing seam allowances. Okay, and with the seam now overlocked, I am gonna put together my notch, which is now harder to see, but you can still make it out. So right here, and that is until where I am going to sew, not further down. And these should also match up. And everything above here also gets matched up. You can find your hip notch somewhere here that you need to match up. And so from the waistline all the way down to the slit. And I'm gonna back tack and stop here and repeat the same for the other side. So now with that done, we can iron the seam allowance open like that and continue that into the slit area. So this is just gonna follow the same exact line that is already in the piece due to the seam, just like that. And we're gonna go around here and fix the slit portion in place as well. I think I'm gonna do that once I finish the hem so that we can do everything in one go and there's not gonna be any back tacking whatsoever. With all of that now done, we can continue and put right sides of sides, front piece and back pieces together right here. Just check which one's the correct side. You can always make that out by the line of the hem in the back. The hem is longer than in the side seam. So I'm just gonna put these together now. You want to iron the seam allowance into the back piece. Now you can see why you not want to use the interfacing tape with a stay stitch, at least on the side seam of the side front piece, so that you're going to have a finish like this. You can use it on the inside here because it's going to be hidden, it's going to be underneath, but just don't put it onto the seam allowance of the side seam of the side front piece. I'm going to put that into the sewing instructions as well as prep work so that you know not to put it there, because you're going to have this ugly white or whatever color strip of interfacing tape right here, and obviously that's not nice to look at. Okay, and the last thing to do for our prep work in the skirt is to also overlock the back seam allowance here of the center back. You can also do that already on your bodice. Okay, and let's go ahead now and put the waistline together. So I have my bodice right here, and now I'm gonna put right sides of my skirt right on top here, and I want to match up all of the seams with the darts and the other seams in the bodice. Make sure that you match those up perfectly, because that's going to be right in your face. And as always, if you're working with fabric that is cut on the bias, it might stretch out, so you want to make sure to ease both of these pieces together, match up the center front as well. And now we can go ahead and put the waist seam together, and we're also going to overlock. Okay, with all of that done, I want to iron the seam allowance into the skirt, so this way, and that way also the interfacing tape disappears. And now the bulk of the dress is done. I'm just going to go over this with my iron from the right side again, just to press that seam down a lot so that it's very flat. And now we can already go ahead and put the zipper in. Okay, I have my zipper right here, and I made sure to mark my zipper notch down here so I can, have it on both sides visible. It can always kind of hide underneath the overlocking stitch and stuff, so I just made it very prevalent. I am gonna put my zipper, so I'm gonna check first of all where my actual stop of the zipper is. It's right here. So I want to have that right at the 1 centimeter mark and pin that in place right here. And now I'm just gonna work my way down without stretching either the fabric or the zipper. The zipper should reach to about the zipper notch a tiny bit. It should be a tiny bit longer. And now with my zipper foot, I can go ahead and sew the one side onto the dress, and then we're gonna mirror the placement to the other side. So what I like to do now is to close my zipper, and then I'm going to use some pins to mark, for example, the waistline right here onto the other zipper band. You can also do that with a fabric marker, like a tailor's chalk or something like that. Then also I want to mark where on my zipper band I stopped at the zipper notch. And right here, I want to mark exactly where the edge of my actual piece is. So not where I stopped sewing, but actually where the zipper band meets the edge of my piece. So with all of that done, I can open my zipper back up very carefully and mirror the placement onto the other side of my dress. I like to start at the waist, so I can use this pin to match up the waistlines. I'm gonna leave the pin in. I just like to have that just as a visual marker so I can check the placement while sewing as well. I'm gonna just quickly turn this around. It's easier for me to pin. Then I'm gonna match up the pin with the upper edge right here. And of course down here, the zipper notch like that. And with that, I can also sew the other side in, and this should be very symmetrical. And once you close everything, it should match up just like that. Also on top here, and then obviously also here at the zipper notch. So that's really nice. Everything matches up. I am going to continue with closing my center back seam. So I'm just going to put right sides together as per usual, match up the hem, and then up here I'm going to use a one-sided foot for that because it's the easiest in my opinion. I am going to put a pin in, and probably about to a centimeter or 1.5 centimeters below the zipper notch I'm going to sew, and that's going to essentially continue the seam that I had for the zipper. So once I iron everything, everything is a one continuous line. So I can now put my center back seam onto my sleeve board and iron the seam allowance open to continue the zipper that, what the zipper wants me to iron. And I'm just gonna check if everything that I sewed looks nice from the outside then, once I'm done. But looks promising from this side. So let's go ahead and turn this right sides out and check how the center back seam looks like at the zipper. And I also want to flatten the zipper seam as well. So right here is where the zipper moves into the normal seam, and we can just press it flat and then it should not be visible. This is just a mark that the pin left, so that's gonna go away with a few washes and wears. And now let's just flatten the rest. I think this looks really, really nice. I like how this all goes together. This is not really visible. Can't really tell where the zipper ends, where the seam begins. So two things left to do: neckline and hemline. So let's start with the neckline. I'm just gonna open my zipper back up just to have a little bit more room. And to finish the neckline, I'm gonna use some bias binding in the same fabric. So I have one right here that I made actually a couple of years ago from this fabric. So I'm just gonna use this, and I only need the seam allowance on one side. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut the seam allowance off. So I'm just gonna measure along here and check how much I approximately need, like this. And now I'm just gonna cut off the seam allowance on one side. Okay, and with that prepped, I'm gonna unfold the zipper right here and overlap the bias binding a tiny bit. We're gonna finish that edge after we folded it over. And I'm gonna do that over on my sewing machine, but I wanna make sure to give enough room on the outer edge right here and not to, pull on it too tightly. I don't want to have any tension on the outer rim of my bias binding. So I'm going to make sure to very, very nicely round off the bias binding here under the sewing machine, so that once everything is flipped and folded under, we have enough room to, have the neckline not stand up like that to lay flat in the end. So let's go ahead and sew at a centimeter right here. So now with that in place, I want to cut down the zipper right here. And now I can fold the bias binding up, the zipper under, and the bias binding down, so that it looks like this on the inside. So very nice. And like this on the right side, also very nice. If you find, like right here, that the bias binding is visible underneath your folding, just snip it off as well, so you can go along the neckline right here and just shorten your seam allowance overall to 5 millimeters, and that should be hidden underneath the bias binding once everything is folded down. So up, in, and down, like that. And now the rest I like to iron in place. So I want to make sure that the ditch of the seam, as per usual, is only visible on the inside, on the wrong side of the fabric. I'm just gonna go over this whole thing with my iron. This does two things. It flattens the seam itself, or like the neckline itself, and also it shapes the bias binding to the shape of our neckline. And now one important thing is to actually close your zipper and check whether your neckline up here in the center back matches up on both sides. Because now you still have the opportunity to move one side a little further down or up or whatever you need to. And with all of that prepped, I'm just gonna go ahead and top stitch the neckline at 5 millimeters, something like that, so that everything stays in place. Okay, and that is what the neckline looks like. As you can see, very, very nice and flat. And this is what the center back looks like. Also very neat and very tidy. Super in love with that method. Let's go ahead and finish the hemline. So I'm gonna start at the center back, and I'm just gonna do a double folded hem. So I'm just gonna fold 5 millimeters in, just like that, go all around the piece. Once I reach the corners here, I am also gonna do the double folded hem, but I am not gonna sew off that edge. I'm gonna pivot, actually, go up and along the sleeve and continue the double folded hem here in the center front again, so that everything is in one seam essentially and looks very tidy, and then the dress is done. So because I cut the skirt on the bias, there's obviously a lot of cut-offs, like huge pieces, like this one right here, which just has a diagonal line. So I want to use that to make the belt that I was talking about. And essentially what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna check my scrap pieces for the biggest pieces that I have, and then I'm gonna cut off one piece right here that is, in my case, 50 centimeters. So you need something that is, let's say, 2/3 of your waist circumference. Okay, I have 4 scrap pieces now put interfacing on them, and they measure about 50 centimeters, something like that. But that's fine to be not perfectly exact, because now we have to put these pieces together. And we do that by just putting those at a 90-degree angle like that. And what is also smart is to put a marking line onto your wrong side of the piece at a 45-degree angle like that on both of them. So also on this one, like this. And now once you put these together at a 90-degree angle, you can use a pin to match up that stitching line right here. Same to the other side here, like this. And now you can sew along here, and that's gonna make a nice long strip. You're gonna repeat the same for the other one. We want to clip away the seam allowance, and now we can iron the seam allowance open, like so. We have a very clean merging point right here that once you fold this, none of the seams will match up, so you have less bulk. That's essentially why you do this. So let's go ahead and repeat the same for the other side here. And I'm going to fold right sides together here and just sew along the edge. And I'm gonna finish this with something like this, which is already by chance cut this way because I use scrap pieces. So I'm just gonna angle the edge on one side of each of these pieces. So I'm just gonna follow along these angles here, and once that's done and everything is turned right sides out, we can cut it to size, and then we can do, you know, the bigger boys right here. Let's snip off the excess. To turn this over, I like to use a straw. I'll use my hook that I use for itty bitty spaghetti straps. So and now we can flatten it with the iron. Okay, and that is one piece done. Let's do the other one. I snipped them to be the same length and also straight. Now with that, these are done. We can continue with our bigger pieces. And what I am going to do is put right sides together, but I'm just gonna sew one side, and the rest I'm gonna do with a top stitch. And now I'm just gonna iron the seam flat and into the other seam. I'm gonna iron the ditch of the seam to one side, and that's gonna be the inside of my belt. And now with all of that prepped, now I'm going to cut off the excess. So now what I want to do is I want to check where my outside is. So this one up here is gonna be my outside. So I am gonna have the smaller belt pieces sit in the center of that, with the right side facing the right side of my outside piece. And be sure to have the center of your actual piece, so without the seam allowance. I'm just gonna go ahead and pin that in place. And now I'm gonna fold the wrong sides, the inside, I guess, of my piece as well on top here. And I'm gonna mark with pins where the smaller belt, where that stops. So right here. So what I want to do now is a slope to that smaller section. This right here is my stitching line on the side. And I want this seam to curve into this point right here, like that. And now you can already see that my, smaller belt pieces, they just stick out of the center right here. So that is exactly until where I'm going to sew. I'm gonna leave approximately, doesn't really matter, but approximately 10 centimeters, something like that. I'm gonna leave that open so I can turn everything right sides out, and I'm gonna close that either by hand or by top stitches once I'm done. So with all of that prepared now, I'm actually gonna start here, sew along my pink line down here where I attach the smaller, the more narrow belt, go down here and go along my stitching line until here and back tack. Repeat the same on the other side. And we're gonna cut down the excess right here. And now, let's just pull on our little thingies right here that stick out to turn everything right sides out. Let's iron this nicely. I'm going to continue ironing the seam allowance towards the inside as it is with the sewn portion of this belt. It's just gonna make it easier for me to close this in the end by hand. And that is your belt made out of scrap material, all done. And you can wear it with a dress or any other garment that you like. But this is a really, really nice and easy method to actually use up your scraps as well. These small little seams right here, you're not gonna see them. They're not gonna be visible once you wear it, but it's gonna make a really, really nice and cute piece in the end. So it's gonna enhance your dress. So that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed this very easy project. It was a super fast sew. I think I worked on it for a little bit less than 3 hours, and I made the belt as well in those 3 hours. So if you are searching for an elegant, classy, easy project, this is the project for you. I'm super, super excited to wear this dress out. Can't wait to shoot it and to show you everything else, obviously. If you haven't already, please go ahead and subscribe to my channel and ring the bell so you'll get notified every time that I post. I post on Sunday, so you can keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, check out my social media. Links to all of that are in the description down below. I am uploading tips and tricks on all of my projects. So if you're interested in that, you might want to check out my Instagram, Pinterest, and YouTube shorts. That is also a very good way to support me. But the very best way is to actually head over to my Etsy store, where you can also find the pattern of today's project. Direct link is in the description box down below. It's the first link. So you might want to check out all of the patterns I have over there. There are also more difficult projects, more advanced projects, elaborate projects, everything that you find on my YouTube channel also has a pattern. Most of them also have a pattern to go with. So if you want to support me in that way, you also get a pattern with that. So thank you so, so much. And also another way to support me is to actually become a member. So you're gonna see your name on the screen here, as well as a small little thank you to you guys. It's just a small little fee every month. So that would be also tremendously helpful. Yeah, with that, thank you so, so much for watching. And I'm gonna see you next Sunday. Bye guys.